Good evening and welcome to Enterprise Agility Champs. We are here today for our November presentation, and we have with us Mr. Vinay Kumar, who is PCC. I have known Vinay, and we were just talking right before we got started, I think way back in 2012, where he had presented along with his co-author and friend Chambers Brothers at an organization where I was working. And I was so impressed with the wealth of knowledge that Vinay has, and I've been following him since. So extremely happy that Vinay could join us to speak with us today. So what is the topic today and why it is so relevant and important to us? So I'm going to tell my own story. So whenever I am looking for a new job, typically, I would apply to organizations. I would see where they're looking for somebody who could solve their problems. As a candidate, I definitely am interested in solving problems. And then once I've looked at a few of them and I want to evaluate and see which ones are more attractive to me, typically what I do is I go to Glassdoor and look at the culture of that organization. What is the CEO's rating? Do they take care of their employees? Where do they stand from a happiness perspective? And so why do I do that? I do that because I know culture is an extremely, extremely important element. Often, a lot of people don't think from a cultural perspective, but I feel that if I'm joining an organization as a manager or a leader or a coach or a scrum master, for me to be effective, it's important for me to understand that my cultural values sit well with that organization's cultural values. And once I'm hired, I personally think that it's my responsibility also to retain the good parts of the culture of the organization and then also build upon it and create the right culture there. But the question that always I have in my mind is, how do you build that culture? How do you sustain? How do you create that culture? And I'm sure many people have similar thoughts in their mind, like how do you create culture? And sometimes you hear things like, you cannot change culture. On the other hand, you hear things like, it's your responsibility to alter and change the culture slowly. So I'm sure all of us are very curious to really understand about how do you sustain, how do you create culture? And with that, I would like to invite our speaker for today, Vinay Kumar. Vinay, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Toby. Good to be here with you all today. I do have a request. I'd love to see you all. I've been on Zoom all day since 9 o'clock. I was doing an executive offsite facilitation. We didn't finish till 6. So I think like you all, it's been a long day. So it gives me energy to see you all. If it's possible, the request is please put on your cameras so we have a human interaction. So it's a request, I would appreciate it. So let me begin by asking you a question. We're talking about culture. What is it and why does it matter? Why are we talking about this thing called culture? And unmute yourself, we're gonna have a conversation today. I'm not a lecture guy who's a talking head. We're gonna engage in a conversation. So what is this thing called culture and why does it matter?
Because it's all about people. Essentially, what we're looking to do is we're looking to go ahead. Organizations are made up of people. Mm-hmm. And what we need to do is they're the ones, everybody has their role within the organization. And the thing is to go ahead and get them all on the same track, mm-hmm. same roadmap, and an understanding of what their roles are. A lot mm-hmm. of times, I'll hear nonsense like, well, we don't need managers. Believe me, you need managers. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it's important to go ahead and separate, and help them identify their roles. Mm-hmm. Because one of the biggest shifts that we've had, regardless of whether it's lean or whether it's agile, is that we've moved away from a consulting model mm-hmm. where, the business side would just go ahead and put together a bunch of wacky requirements, mm-hmm. and toss them over the transom and say, okay, it's your problem now. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, for Agile, what makes it really successful is a partnership between business and IT. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that we also are fighting right now is very simply that business needs to understand that IT is not a cost overhead.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a sector that will help you invest
Mm-hmm.
in new ways of doing business in order to go ahead and be competitive.
Okay. So why does culture matter? So why are we talking about this in culture? What difference does it make? Thank you, Jim, for your adding your voice to the conversation. Well, why does it matter, this culture?
Because
Thank you,
culture can be, a good culture can be very encouraging, and a bad culture can just be suppressive.
Okay, so culture impacts our environment, right? And what?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Who else? Subhashish, you had unmuted yourself. Love to hear your voice. Go ahead, add to it.
So hi, so there is a saying, culture, it's strategy for breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
So how much strategy we make for our deliverables for our corporation.
Mm-hmm.
At the baseline, we are all humans, and the culturally enriched always shines.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why culture is very important, be it in your social circle, be it in your organization, be it anywhere you go around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how is culture created? And who has the biggest impact on the culture?
All of us.
All of us. Okay. Great response. And how do we create this thing called culture? We talk about culture, but how is it created?
Being empathetic, being a good listener, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and trying to understand where they're coming from.
Okay.
And all those good stuff that we learned.
So how we conduct ourselves? Is that what you're saying, Subhashish?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. How about who else?
I'm going to go out on a limb to say the vision of that organization. So when an organization was found, it was probably founded on some principles, some values, some mission, where they want to go, and also take into consideration what are those foundational values, right? And I think that drives culture to a certain extent. So you don't create it from scratch. My understanding is that an organization's culture is its common beliefs, its common assumptions. So I think it's important to understand what are our common beliefs. So let's say tomorrow I want to start a company, and I'm going to say, I really like Jason. Jason and I have very similar values. And then probably Frank has a lot of money that he's going to bring in as capital. So we probably want to bring Frank in. But Jason and I want to make sure that Frank has values that are similar to ours, or he's willing to change his values slightly to a shared value, right? So I think now that Jason, Frank, and I are kind of the co-founders of that organization, and Frank, thanks for the money. So I think once we start with that foundation and then we build on it, that's my layman's idea, and I would want to hear more. How would what is the right way to do it?
Yeah, and we'll expand on this in a moment. I think Maru has the hand up, so go ahead, Maru.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Try to take this honest. I do not think culture is created in any way. I think it is born. It's like a phoenix. It reborns itself over and over again, and it's the part of ourselves as a system that we cannot lie about. You cannot engineer a culture. It will display and manifest itself even through all the barriers and masks and makeup and fillers and whatever we put in front of it, between it and ourselves. It will manifest because it's inside us, and therefore we exist inside a culture. It emerges through us, through our behavior, but it's also not fixed. So we can maybe try to steer or influence or morph that culture, but we cannot create it.
Isn't morphing a form of creation? We can exert some influence on it, can we not?
Morphing is a form of evolution, it's a form of homomorphism, and we can definitely influence it, definitely pocket-wise, because that's how a system works, with limited context, limited knowledge. But the intention, if it's sustained, that's something that gives a change to set a direction for the evolution of a culture. And since we are very complicated systems and very complicated creatures, we don't just have one intention. Plus, we have many layers of intentions. Therefore, I think it's pretty crazy to think that we can deterministically, in a computational sense, define our cultures, or we can try to steer them to the best of our intent.
Okay. Yeah. Jim, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, one of the things that I think has a lot to do with it is what are the values of the company, and what are especially management and executive values, because I've dealt with more than my share of body shops where essentially the value is money, money, money. And people are not people, they're resources. So, and, that's coming back to bite a number of companies very simply because with Generation Z, okay, the fact that you spend most of your waking days during the week working, you want to work in an environment where you feel appreciated, where you enjoy what you're doing and that sense of accomplishment. And so I've seen some companies in particular that have all of a sudden, when you talk about the resignation, you've heard it on the news, mass resignations and everything. A lot of that is coming from those companies that just didn't look at their people as assets, as valuable knowledge workers, but purely as resources that are suffering the most.
Okay, thank you, Jim. So I think what you touched on is values and our beliefs, all display into how we show up, what actions we take, and what we create through our actions. So my claim is that culture is the biggest lever where culture begins at top leadership in an organization, and it cascades down. So from there, we're going to take a look at what does that leaders do, right? When they come into an organization, what do they do as leaders? And then we'll talk about what the link is to culture. So let me ask you a question. What do leaders do?
Command and
sure
control.
Business.
What's that?
Command and control.
Command and control. Okay, that's a form of leadership. That's the style of leadership.
To make sure our business thrives.
Business strategy. What else do they do?
To make sure our business thrives and survives.
Yeah. And if you were to type in chat also, it might be easier with a number of us on here. Just type in chat. What does that leaders do? If you think about them on a day-to-day basis when they come in, what are they doing? And if all the things they do, what is most important that they do well? Go ahead and type in your chat box. Make sure business thrives and survives, right? And I would even add the word thrives in there, right? Doing well today, doing well tomorrow, make stakeholders, shareholders happy, steer the organization, set a vision, set a direction, and make sure it's going in that direction, right? Getting alignment, make sure we're all rowing together in the same direction, right? They help reportees thrive, right? One of the leaders' function is to develop the downlines, their people, and build capacity so they can do more. Because as leaders grow, organizations grow. Yeah, and attract and retain talent, lead by example. So all those are things they do. But let me ask you this. If you're watching leaders through a glass pane, doing all these things, what's the most fundamental action that they're taking to do all those things? What's the most fundamental action that you would see them doing? If someone's retaining talent, developing talent, aligning people, developing a strategy, what would you see them doing? What's the most fundamental action leaders take? Thinking and communicating, observing and reacting, right? Listen and seeing, right? All those things are true. Our claim as leaders are conversational engines. They create everything through conversations, what they say and how they say it. Yes, now the conversation comes from the way they see things, from their beliefs, from their values, from their assumptions they make, from their way of being. But the actions they take, they create conversations. And leaders are architects, conveners, and facilitators of conversation. So our claim is we invent tomorrow out of what we say today. For example, let's say Toby comes to you all and say, guys, what are you all doing Friday for lunch? You look at your calendars and say, wide open. And Toby says, let's book it. Now, is Friday different after this conversation than before? Did we not create lunch tomorrow through a dialogue, through a conversation? When you make an offer to your customers and the customers say, yes, I'll buy it from you, is tomorrow not different than if they say no? When you apply for a position and the employer says, yes, we'll bring you on, which happens through conversation, your future is different than as opposed to if they say no, thank you very much. We all create through conversation. So conversations aren't about the action. At the leadership levels, the conversation is the action that we take. That is our doing. That's the work. If you look at relationships, now don't answer this question. What percent of your relationships are physical in the intimate sense versus being conversational? Which are they, physical or conversational? Are they not more conversational? Let's say we have someone at work, we only talk about deliverables, about tasks, about deadlines. That's one relationship. Another relationship, we talk about our hopes and dreams, what we want out of life, what scares us, wishes. Tell me, which is a deeper relationship? First one or the second one? What's the difference between those two? What's the difference in those two relationships? The first one, you talk about tasks and deliverables and so on, it's all work. The other, you talk about your hopes and dreams and other things as well, which is a stronger and deeper relationship. My claim is going to be number two. It's you feel more connected, do we not? And the only difference is the conversation. Change the conversation, change the relationship. So conversations are that powerful, and we often don't realize it. Sometimes people say, stop talking, get to work. For leaders, conversation is the work. I remember one time I was giving a keynote at NASA, and the chief human capital officer comes up to me and says, Vinay, I thought I was wasting time in all these meetings. I got to cut them out. He did not realize that the conversation, the meetings is his job. Now, yes, we can make it more effective, but the conversation we engage in is how we create the future. It's how we create culture. Imagine an organization where you have a CEO who makes commitments but doesn't keep them. What kind of culture do you think that's going to create? Positive or not so positive?
Not so positive.
That's all right. Imagine a CEO who talks nicely in front of you and talks negatively behind you. Do you think people will figure that out eventually? What kind of culture is that organization? What's the trust level in that organization? Versus another organization, the leaders keep their commitments. What they say in front of you and what they say behind you is pretty consistent. Which one do you think you have a greater trust? First or the second one?
Second one, for sure.
Second one.
How's that? Why is that?
Because it makes it seem like what you say matters, and you have a place to work from. Like you said, there's trust there. You're not going to say, oh, well, he's just saying that. He's not really going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So does a leader walk the talk? Right? What they walk and what they say and what they do is aligned. That's one culture. If you have a culture, if your organization where what the leader says and what the leader does, there's a gap, creates a culture of cynicism, hypocrisy, breaks down trust. And then you wonder why people aren't engaged, right? So all cultures created out of conversation. You don't need hammers and nails. You need to be very mindful of what are we saying and how are we saying it. Do we keep our commitments? Is one way, right? Do we conduct ourselves in a way that's uplifting and positive? If someone makes a mistake, how do we treat that person? Do we shoot him down, knock him down, or do we say, hey, what can we learn from it? So as leaders, we have to become very conscious of our conversations, what we say and how we say things. And make sure what we say and what we do, there's no gap there, it's aligned. That's how we shape culture. If you look at all organizations, if you look at reporting structures, you see reporting lines. If you look at it this way, this cut, we say organizations are simply networks of conversations, relationships, and commitments. The foundation of the house, identity, who are we? Who do we serve? What's our offering? What are our core values? What are our norms? What's acceptable in an organization? What isn't acceptable in an organization? How do you create all that? Is it someone just sits in the office by themselves? Or is it through dialogue that we come up with these things? If you look at the roof of the house, where are we going? Our vision, our mission, our goals and objectives, and our priorities, how are those established? Those are established through conversations. They're not done by them. No one does that by themselves. It's through dialogue in offsites and meetings that we come up with those things. In the middle of the house, what we call human beings coordinating action, that's how we get things done. I make a request of Toby, or let's say Toby makes a request of me, and based on my commitment to Toby, Toby makes a commitment to Kanessa. Kanessa makes a commitment to Jason. Now, if I don't come through my commitment, what happens to the chain?
Breaks down.
Breaks down, right?
Jason gets the shaft.
What's that?
I said Jason gets the shaft.
Jason gets the shaft, right? So, and all these are actions that we take in conversation. They're called requests and offers and commitments and promises. These are linguistic acts that we do, that we engage in. They're conversation. Do we hold each other accountable or do we not? That will shape your culture. So all culture is created through dialogue, through conversation. That's the tool that we have that we can leverage to create and shape culture. If you look at organizations, going back to the house drawing, there's different kinds of leadership conversations we engage in. Number one, we build relationships. We strengthen relationships. How is relationship? Remember, we said it's conversation. An extraordinary relationship provides a foundation for extraordinary outcomes. The stronger the conversation, the stronger you keep your commitments, how you show up will determine the quality of the relationship. The goals and objectives is through conversations. The basement, the values and purpose and all that is conversations. People getting things done is through conversation. I mean, how did this, our coming together come about? Did that come through conversation? Toby, how did this come about? Me being here and us being together here. Did Toby step out?
Sorry,
I would guess
I don't know.
conversation.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think many years ago, I think in 2012 or 13 is when I interacted with Vinay, and I was very extremely impressed with his knowledge of coaching and how the culture in his organization at that time. And I thought, it would be wonderful to hear some of his insights, and that's how Vinay is here today. Vinay, did I answer your question or?
Yeah, so you reached out, you made a request, saying, Vinay, would you come and speak? Right, you made a request, human beings coordinating action. And I said, yes, let's book a date on there, here we are. Announcement went out, you all accepted the announcement. You could say that was an offer, right? There's a speaker coming, there's an event taking place, you all accepted, and here we are. All that happened in conversation. Now imagine if I accept and I don't show up today. Right? What does that say? Not very good, is it?
No.
It happens in an organization. People make commitments and people don't follow through. Does it not happen?
Yep.
Then we talk about them.
All the time.
And we don't talk with them. We talk about them. What happens to the culture?
It deteriorates.
How so, Toby? How does it deteriorate?
Because we are not leading by. See, if leaders are not leading by example,
Mm-hmm.
and if commitments are broken from time to time, I think a lot of people will start thinking that it's okay to break commitments in this organization. And then if we are not withholding the values and principles, then that trickles down into the rest of the organization as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the accepted behaviors. So if leaders show that it's acceptable behavior for them to falter on their commitments or on their promises, then the managers, the senior managers, the middle level managers, they will also start doing the same thing. And the new breed of leaders that get created, they will also follow the same.
Yeah. It just cascades down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In this culture, not keeping your word is acceptable. Right? Not showing up at meetings on time is acceptable. Nothing happens. Someone treats someone in a very disrespectful manner, no one does something about it. In this culture, this is okay. And if they say this is not tolerable, not acceptable, but they accept it, what's the real culture here? What they say or what they do?
What they do.
What they do, right? So this whole notion of leaders creating culture through conversation is so critical. It's not hammers and nails. It's what we say and what we do. It's through our actions. And for leaders, the actions are conversational. That's the simple thing. What are you thinking, Kanessa? You said, what's starting in your mind?
I've always found that having a conversation with someone opens them up a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So when people, I mentioned, like, I worked on a project where everyone hated Scrum. They didn't want to go Scrum. They loved their waterfall.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mention it, but in conversations, I would say, why don't we try something new? Why don't we do a little something different? And just because we've had conversations that kind of slowly turn them against, that whole rigidity that they had against Agile. And they started going, okay, we'll try something different. I didn't have to call it Agile, didn't have to call it Scrum, didn't have to call it anything technical, but let's just try it this way and see what happens. And at the end of the day, to hear them go, oh, well, that worked out really well. Yeah, bet it did.
Yeah.
So just having those little conversations and getting to know people, I think helps them to feel more heard, especially with leadership.
Yeah. And Steven makes a great comment in the chat, right? What is written, what is said, what is done, not always aligned.
Yeah.
Imagine what the culture in that organization is like, as opposed to an organization where there is alignment. Is it the same culture or is it different?
Different, maybe same on paper, but, different in behavior, feeling, attitude.
Yeah. If there's no alignment, this creates cynicism, hypocrisy, does it not? Breaks down trust. People become paralyzed. They don't take risks. Jim, you were going to say something.
Essentially, one of the things that we're kind of looking at is what they do and what they say. What they say is for the public. Generally, it's all good when you're talking to the public. When you're talking to clients, it's inside where, I've seen situations where it had transformation or aspects of transformation were talked about. And they said, well, yeah, that's really a good idea. And then it went nowhere fast.
Yeah.
And part of the reason is very simply because when you're talking to them, you need to understand the level of influence they have. One person. And so when you're looking at an agile transformation, it's a question of not just talking to one person, but talking to a number of them and getting them to understand essentially what Kanessa pointed out, conversation with her teammates and everything, all of a sudden, hey, that's not a bad idea. And how I've even used that game in as an agile coach, where I've got two teammates that are essentially have two different ways of doing it, and I'd say, okay, great, I'm not going to take a stand for one or the other. I'm just going to go ahead and ask them. I says, well, run this out and tell me if we're running into any issues if we do it this way, and then do it the same thing with the counterpart. And eventually, a conversation takes place, and they come up with a way to go ahead and deal with it. But a lot of times you just have I guess, especially in the larger companies, you essentially have a class of people in there. They've gone to Wharton, they've gone to Harvard, this, that, the other thing. And, basically they just look at, okay, well, do what I say, not what I do type of thing. And, you just see it. And so and the reason why I say this is very simply because I've seen what happens in startups where, hey, these are regular people, they're on the ground, and they understood that they did this as a team. And okay, just because we get bigger and we start adding organization hasn't necessarily changed the mentality of, hey, I didn't do it, we did it.
Yeah, it's the me to we, right? And what you mentioned about early on, if people ask for ideas, people bring up ideas and nothing happens, then people stop offering ideas, don't they?
Yes.
And then we say, why don't people speak up? Well, because they're not getting a response. Not that they expect something to happen, but please follow up with that. That's again culture. In this organization, people offer ideas, it doesn't go anywhere. Then you get a culture of silence where people don't speak up anymore. They don't offer any ideas. Then you wonder why people aren't speaking. Because we don't respond to that. It's a missing conversation. So with that, let's go to this. We talked about 3 levers, right? That was the title of the talk. So what are the 3 levers that we can pull and push and pull to shape the culture? These are 3 types of overall conversation found 3 types. What I call missing conversations, prohibitive conversation we need to prohibit, and conversation we need to require. Let's take a look at each of these. This is what I call missing conversations. These are conversations we're not talking about, but if they did, things could be better. What are some examples of missing conversations? For example, someone doesn't keep a commitment. We don't talk with that person, we talk about them around their back, and we go around and it's what I call recreational character assassination. We don't talk to them, right? And they have no idea this is happening. Now people saying, what kind of person is this? We don't get feedback to each other. We're not on the same page. We don't have clear priorities. Someone's engaging in passive aggressive behavior. We don't talk to that person. We tolerate it. Giant missing conversation. Can you think of your organizations and see other conversations not occurring? But if they did, things could be better? Think about it. What are some missing conversations that you all notice? Things we're not talking about. These are often the elephants in the room, as we say. We walk around them, but we don't talk about them. Yes, Jim?
Essentially, one of the things that I would say is the number of conversations. Having the same conversation, not with just one person, mm-hmm. but with several people, mm-hmm. in order to go ahead and spread the idea, mm-hmm. and basically start influencing.
Okay. Yeah. So you have to build
on the goal.
Yeah. So you have to build support points. I think what I'm hearing you say, Jim. Socialize the idea. Is that what you're meaning here?
Yeah. Promoting the idea, and like I said, it's not just one executive, because you never know what their sphere of influence is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing is to go ahead and get it. Yeah. Have that conversation with a number of people. And again, we can go ahead and thank Knessa for this, is the fact that these other executives are going to talk to each other, mm-hmm. yeah. about it, and essentially build a momentum, regardless of whether it's about, hey, this is a good idea, or this is a good idea, and this is also going to make me look good.
Yeah. Jason said a wonderful conversation about me are missing, right? What are my aspirations? What are my goals? What's important, right? Those are missing, right? Toby, you have your hand raised. I can't see everybody's hands here. Sorry, guys. Just speak up.
So one of the things that I notice a lot, and it happens all the time, especially as an enterprise agile coach, is you're helping an organization to transform, and you hear people in certain meetings or in the hallway saying, this is never going to work in our organization. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we don't have the time to have those conversations with them. We let it pass. But every time when I've heard that and I've gone back to that person and had a one-on-one and say, hey, why do you think it's not going to work in this organization? Mm-hmm. Why do you think so? Mm-hmm. And having those conversations and understanding from them, what their beliefs are, what their assumptions are, what their fears are, mm-hmm. and then getting to see if there is a trend and taking action to resolve those is extremely important. And if I, for example, am facilitating a 1-hour meeting like a town hall, and we hear a few people who are opposed to the idea, mm-hmm. and if we don't have a conversation with them, that's a missing conversation, and you've missed an opportunity to perhaps listen to them and perhaps even change their thinking, mm-hmm. right? So for me, those are extremely important, because a lot of times we focus on the people who are supporting us, mm-hmm. but we don't give enough love to the people who are opposing us and take it as an opportunity to actually convert their thinking.
Yeah. Or have our thinking be converted. It could go either way, right? But through conversation, we can dig deeper and say, what's at the heart of this? Why I want to work here? Maybe there's a valid reason, or maybe not. But let's talk about it, right?
Yes, exactly.
Sheila, you have your hand up.
Yeah, there are situations that are even worse where people don't say anything because they know that it's going to be frowned on if they don't appear to be in agreement. So they just don't say anything, but they just don't support it. And that's a conversation that's really not happening.
Yeah. And what's the impact of that, Sheila, when that conversation isn't happening?
Well, it depends on what level the people are at and how many of them there are, but it can make the whole effort fail.
Yeah.
It can make things worse than they were before you tried to do something to improve it.
Yeah. Word that comes to mind is sabotage.
Yeah, right. That happens. Wonderful activities in your organizations, especially when you're back in person or some way, or use some kind of technology, put up flip charts around the office or some forum. Say, guys, what are the conversations we're not having around here? But if you did, things could be better, right? Or what are the burning questions you wish you could ask, but you're not asking? Other things on your mind that we're not talking about. And see what's surface. You'd be amazed what comes up, right? So this is a wonderful activity to bring these conversations to surface. And then when you engage in them, now you're creating a different future. You're creating a different culture by having these conversations. So be thinking about what are the conversations in your organization or in your lives that are not occurring. But if they did, things could be better. This is lever number one. Lever number two is what I call conversation we need to prohibit. These are disruptive conversations. Do they occur in organizations? Talk negatively about people behind their backs, right? Shoot the messenger. Someone brings up, says what needs to be said. What do? We hold it against them. We hold a grudge or something like that. Does that happen in organizations?
Yes.
So, and we say, guys, we want you to speak up. And then we say, why people aren't speaking up? There's always saying when your most loyal people go silent, something's missing here, right? Prohibit conversation in our organization. Being disrespectful is not acceptable. Passive aggressive behavior is not acceptable. These are conversation styles and behaviors that we need to stop. That also shapes culture. So I think about disruptive conversations. What comes to your mind? What are some examples that come to your mind?
Put my hand up.
Sorry, go ahead. See it. Go ahead, Samantha.
It's okay. Disruptive conversations. I just actually got out of a mini retro today. So one thing that was really important was we had to decide how we were going to handle ourselves today. And we had to let our choice was everyone's opinion is respected and we let them have that. There was you don't have to come against them, but you can voice your opinion in a safe space. And sometimes people do that in such a negative way that it takes the air out of the room. It brings everyone down. So those are the kind of disruptive conversations. But when you actually make it a point to listen, you never know what you're going to get out of that. It's sometimes like those people who say, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. It's usually because something negative has happened in the past and they're just expecting a pattern.
Well, because people are listening to those lenses, right?
Yeah.
If it happened before, then we start say this could happen again. There's some comments in the chat like gossip, ridicule. Yeah, they damage psychological safety. And when people don't feel psychologically safe, they don't speak up. Yeah.
Right.
Sheila, have you see your hand raised? Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sheila, go ahead.
The other thing is when stakeholders fight among themselves about whose priority is the highest priority. And then that just undermines morale for the whole team, sometimes the whole organization. Because really it needs to be what are the priorities for the enterprise, and you need to have a united perspective.
Yeah.
The other thing is, in some organizations, the conversation where you ask for something and get told no, but with absolutely no explanation. And you know it's something that the no can't stand, but you don't know what the real problem is, what the real reason is, because they're not speaking.
Yep. And the question is why they're not speaking. Is there some past experience? It's a culture in the organization that people don't feel safe to speak up. It's maybe connected to psychological safety, right? Or lack of it, rather. Yeah. I think Maru and then Jason.
Yeah. In general, every organization will decide to have its own selection of conversations to prohibit or not. It might be dysfunctional, but if it's their choice, that's their choice. That's the fact. Not up to me to judge. But one that I'm part of, some common sense rules that society has invented over tens of thousands of years of evolution, such as do not do to people, do not have conversations with them that you wouldn't want to have had with yourself. You know, nobody likes to be harassed, for example. Like, it seems like common sense, but reality is not common sense, number one. And number two is conversations that are prohibited always carry with them wave, ripples. And they will tend to manifest through other channels, in other forms, and maybe in other hidden conversation spaces. And that's something to be very careful about.
Absolutely. Well said, Mauro. We got to watch out for that, right? Because they'll find ways. So we have to stop those conversations. Why are they even happening in the first place? So we say we don't choose to engage in these kind of conversations. So that's how we shape culture. Yeah.
What I'm trying to get at is not the conversation that has to be prohibited, is the intent behind the conversation, the desire to have the conversation that should be prohibited. So that's something you cannot easily do because nobody can get into your head. So the only way to do that is through conversations.
You have to talk it out, right? Clear the airs, as they say. Talk it out. Yeah, sometimes you do that too. Jason, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Just one that floored me just the other day. One of the stakeholders' bosses sent out an email and wanted to know why this project was behind, and then started talking about how their review was based on this going to be delivered and how this other team's review was going to be affected by this. And I'm like, do you expect anyone to, respond positively to a conversation like that? I was just floored.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Jason. And in the interest of time, because I know we're coming up on time, the final lever you're going to pull is what we call required conversation. In this organization, these are conversations we must absolutely engage in. If someone doesn't keep a commitment, we don't talk about them, we talk with them. We require feedback conversation. If there's a misunderstanding, we require a conversation for clearing the air, right? Or expressing appreciation. So again, think about it so these are the conversations that we're talking about. Disruptive, that we need to prohibit, missing conversation, and required conversation. These are your levers that you push and pull to create and shape culture. Now, I love this quote by Judith Glasser, author of Conversational Intelligence. She says to get to the next level of greatness depends on the quality of the culture, which depends on quality of relationships, which depends on quality of the conversations. Everything in organizations happens through conversations. So becoming intentional about what we say, how we say it, when we say it, where we say it, all those things is how we create and shape culture. And conversations matter because they're very creative and generative. So more intentional we become, the more we can create what matters to us. So your tools are conversations.
Yeah.
That's how you create and shape culture. Questions or comments? 7:50, Toby, how'd I do?
Excellent.
We said 7:50, so here we are. I saw the cane coming, so I said, let me shut up.
One short question to you, Vinay. Go ahead, Kes.
I was just going to say a required conversation that I feel doesn't happen as often as it needs to is the follow-up conversations. When someone makes a promise or says they will support you, making sure that you're following up with them. If they say they're going to do something or they haven't given you a date, put that deadline on. A lot of times we just assume people will do it because they said it and have no idea that they have 15 other things on their mind, or they don't know the time frame in which they have to say it. So really make sure you lock those down because, leaving it in the air kind of leaves you with air. You have
that's
nothing.
a lot of breakdowns happen in that conversation for action cycle.
Mm-hmm.
That's where many breakdowns are happening. And what happened, we make it a trust issue. I can't trust you. Or then it goes to, I don't trust you. No, we have an ineffective conversation. We don't have a clear request. We don't have a clear commitment.
Right.
I remember one time this one person would say, well, let's go to movies Friday night. That sounds good. Somebody says, well, this person heard a commitment. Well, no, this is not a commitment. That sounds good. It's not a commitment. They never showed up. This person said, well, I can't trust you. You never show up. We didn't have a clear agreement. Sounds good. It's not an agreement. Right?
You didn't say what Friday night it was.
Well, there you go. Another question. Good. So a lot of fuzzy language, fuzzy conversations.
Yep. And what was the movie?
Yeah, which one movie, right? Where and all those things are missing.
Yes. Yeah.
Listening to you, I was thinking the whole time, there's something I like a lot from, I don't know if you're familiar with transactional analysis.
Transactional analysis?
Yeah. Anyways, but one of the basic thinking tools behind that, it comes from therapy, right? I've been trained in that the past 2 years, and it really changes the way you view and you interact with systems. One of the key concepts is the concept of contracts, and communication is usually a kind of medium that is extremely complex because it hides 99% of the complexity that is going through the medium behind words that can mean different things to different people, but also different constructs to different people. Contracts, on the other hand, forces you to use language, not be used by language, but use language to communicate intent. And that intent will include your psychic status, psychological status, your expected status, your expected intent, and you will ask for, you will purposefully ask for a commitment, for example, or for a strike, or for many different things that we humans think about, expect, but we just imagine in our heads, and we think that goes through communication. That's one thing. The other thing that the whole talk made me think about is the spaces. I don't want to say engineering, but spaces that have to be offered or created or nurtured for these conversations to take place under the best conditions. That's also not so easy, because that's where you're going to talk about aspects that you have been talking with Kanissa about, and the examples about trust, safety, and fear, and stuff like that. But you're right. The foundation, I agree, in my understanding, foundation is conversations, having them, the desire to have them. The other things will, derive afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of great points you made, Maru, but I'm also watching my time clock here.
I want to add something to
hands
Toby, if I may. So I want to add something to, actually, Maru, you brought up transaction analysis, and I remember having read a book in the final year of my college on transaction analysis, and I think the author was Thomas Harris, and he talks about three kinds of modes or three kinds of avatars: parent, child, and teacher. And basically, right, that's the book, if I remember. So I think what the author talks about is that having conversation at the same level is important. So if the parent in me is talking to the child in you, or if I'm asking a parent type question and you are responding as a child, chances are that we're not having a good conversation. So it has to be at the same level. So in simple words, right, if there is a person in your organization or your team who's always joking, who's always kidding around, but when he or she says serious things, is never taken serious because people think they're just joking. So, that's a great book. And I think in the last 20 years, there are so many different books and formats in which the same information has come out. But a great point, Maru. Thank you.
Yeah, and the person who's always joking around, by that mannerism or that communication, his public identity is this person joking. So people don't take him seriously. And in fact, his sole identity, that person created himself by the things he says and does, right? And what Maru said about language being different meaning, different words, same words have different meanings for different people. There's often misinterpretations. Sometimes there's so many possibilities of breakdowns and misunderstandings and misinterpretation. I'm sometimes often amazed how anything works at all.
Yeah.
Truly, it amazes me. Yeah, because we don't have shared understanding. We have different meanings. And someone says something, I hear something, Toby hears something, Jim hears something else. Well, who's right? We're all interpreting all the time.
Many times I've seen executives get angry at the fact that their management didn't understand, didn't implement what they wanted in the yearly strategy. So after 2-3 years, and then they scream at them and stuff. But when I come into the conversation as a coach and I reconstruct the system and I reconstruct the history behind that, I find out that they were driving like aqua planning. You know, they thought they were steering in the right direction, but they were not steering. They were just sliding on the basis of their own assumptions and didn't look for, am I in control of the car? Am I checking on the people, etc.? I'm living in my own illusion inside my head because I think I said whatever they needed to hear, but I'm not thinking inside their heads. I'm thinking out of my own head. It's not communication. This is talking to yourself and hoping to be heard by others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kind of strikes me as that old saying about, in God we trust, all others sign receipts.
Yes.
Yes.
Well said.
Trust but verify. Yes, that is so true.
Yeah. Any questions or anything else? I think we have 3 more minutes. Well, Knaz, let me turn it back to you. I know you have closing remarks, so turn it back.
Yeah, I would just say thank you, Vinay, for today. This was so enlightening and helpful. And actually, I think for a lot of people, it sounds like they've been working with this, but they hadn't been to put it into an actual concept. So thank you for doing that. Thanks everyone for coming through and supporting us. We will not be having anything in December just because of the holidays. And then we'll see you all in January. So that's my bit. And if you have any other questions.
Yeah, one last
if you have any other,
This is one of the few meetups where I didn't realize how quickly the time passed by.
There's a compliment.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it was not death by PowerPoint, which was good.
Happy holidays, everybody. If we're
Happy
not going to see you.
Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yes.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to make a shameless pitch. If you're not part of the ESC meetup yet, please sign up. It's free and be part of our community. And then if you have topics that you would like us to present in the coming year, please send us a message. We'll try to find the best presenters and best thought leaders to bring to Enterprise Agility Champs. And also, if you would like to present here, we would love to hear from you as well. With that, happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays. We're going to see you in January.
See you in the new year.
Bye.
Cheers.